Words from the Gospel. When Joseph awoke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. In the name of God, source, word, and life-giving Spirit. Amen. As some of you know, I have an older sister. And this is truly a good thing because she is a very responsible older sister who looks after me. Even as adults, she loans me her car and drops off homemade soup on a weekly basis. This sense of responsibility in her was evident at a very early age. Our neighbors trusted her. She would be booked up for weeks to babysit the children along the block. As a younger brother, the only responsibility the neighbors ever gave me was to pick up their mail when they went away on holiday. So I know mail was a bigger deal back then, but compared to caring for their children, it's really not the same thing. It worked out the same way with the Christmas pageant. As an experienced babysitter, naturally, my sister got to play the role of Mary, a leading role with the responsibility of holding an actual real baby. I was like a shepherd or something, I don't even remember. And whatever it was an entirely forgettable role. But as I was thinking about this past week, I wondered why I had never managed to land the role of Joseph. You know, he actually doesn't really do that much in the Christmas pageant. In fact, I realized I couldn't name any of my friends who had been Josephs. I don't recall any of us being enthusiastic about getting the role either. There are no lines, you dress like a shepherd anyways, and all you do is stand beside some girl at the front of the church. When I organized the Christmas pageant at St. Mary Magdalene a few years ago, I cast a 4.5-year-old Joseph. I gave him an apron, a plastic hammer, and a glue gun and told him, stay close to the girl who's Mary and don't fidget. He was an excellent Joseph. What I'm trying to say is that Joseph can seem like a younger brother who has no responsibilities. He's just sort of there, off to the side, without seeming to do or say very much. He is a forgettable character, fly under the radar sort of character in the Christmas story. But he has important responsibilities too. And that is what I want to explore in today's gospel. The Gospel of Matthew relates the details of Jesus' birth exclusively from the perspective of Joseph. In our gospel, we meet Joseph in a moment of decision. He has learned that Mary is with child. We are not told how he takes this news. We can imagine that he was disbelieving at first, maybe disappointed, possibly even angry. In the background, we sense the threat of scandal. Mary's honor is at stake, his honor too. So Joseph makes a plan to take care of the situation quietly. To be honest, I'm not sure it's a great plan, as it leaves Mary with a child and no husband, but we sense how it is a plan developed with compassion. Joseph does not want to expose Mary to public disgrace. I have wondered this week how he struggled with the responsibility of the situation. Did he worry about what would happen to the child? Was he troubled about how Mary was to survive? Might he have been frightened about what it would all mean for him and his own future? Joseph is making one of those decisions that is between a rock and a hard place. I learned this week in preparing for this homily that in some icons of the Nativity, Joseph is pictured very much off to the side, separated from Mary and Jesus. Joseph is sitting down, facing away from his son, with his head actually in his hands. he looks like he's in mental anguish. It seems that the iconographic tradition wants us to believe that on the night of Jesus' birth, that Joseph is thinking, what in heaven do I do now? How am I supposed to be this child's father? It's not the best new dad look. To be honest, instead of happy and proud, Joseph is troubled and confused. But in the iconography, there might be more going on in Joseph's head. Brother James of the Society of St. John the Evangelist in Boston notes that in these nativity icons, beside this confused and troubled Joseph, is an old man with a crooked and twisted staff. The staff could symbolize the mental anguish of Joseph, who doesn't know what to do, with the voices in his head bending and twisting his thoughts. Brother James notes how this is often very much our own story in decision-making. We want to do the right thing, make the right decision, be responsible decision makers. Mulling everything over can be hard. Who of us haven't put our head in our hands at one point? Joseph might seem like a lousy new dad, but he has a lot in common with anyone who has had to make a tough decision. Brother James also notes that it is incredibly significant that we are told Joseph is a righteous man. In the Gospel of Matthew, the theme of righteousness is very important. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Joseph is not just a good man. He is a righteous man whose life is shaped by a sense of justice, compassion, and dedication to God. Joseph wants to make a decision that would not only please God, but be of God. And I hope that is something that we also strive for in our own lives, to make decisions that not only please God, but are of God. That in our responsibilities, we think in terms of justice and compassion. That when we are challenged or hurt by something, that we take the time to mull it over, perhaps even with our head in our hands, listening to all the voices as we seek to make a just and compassionate decision. When Joseph decides to dismiss Mary quietly, no one could have blamed him for this decision. It was the decision that abided by the law and made logical sense, since he was not the father of Jesus. But somehow we sense that this decision is still not the righteous thing. In the language of the Beatitudes, his decision does not seem to be of the values of God's kingdom. It makes logical sense, but doesn't feel right. In our gospel, Joseph will get a little help in understanding this from a messenger of God, from an angel. The angel says to Joseph, "Do not be afraid." Fear is something that is present in the Bible, just as it is present in our own lives. We have probably all been afraid about something this past week. It might not have been a very big fear. It might not have been a very rational fear, but fear is one of the things that bends and twists our decision-making. From Genesis to Revelation, the God of the Bible tells us, "Do not be afraid." It is no different in the story of Joseph. Joseph, worried and troubled, is told, "Do not be afraid. Take Mary as your wife. Name your son Jesus." I think that sometimes fear is like that old man in the icon beside Joseph, with the crooked staff in the icons of the Nativity. Fear bending and twisting our thoughts, fear leaving us in a muddle, fear holding us back from making decisions based on God's kingdom, fear distorting our sense of righteousness. When Joseph awakes, he changes his decision. He listens to the angel and does what was commanded of him. The gospel makes it sound so simple, like Joseph overcame his fears and just got on with it. I have this feeling that it might have been a bit more like what the iconographers depict, that even after reversing his decision, that Joseph still had to contend with his fears, that the situation of Jesus' birth was still a bit of a muddle for him, that seeking to make the right choice or the righteous choice was always something that required Joseph to listen for the voice of God. I think this is the greatest gift that Joseph can offer us as people of faith. Joseph's story is our story. It is our story because it reminds us that when we listen to the voice of God who tells us, "Do not be afraid," amazing things can happen. It is a story about making decisions based on God's righteousness. And it is a story that acknowledges the mental anguish and fear are real parts of our lives. But so also is God's message: do not be afraid. This past year has been a year of discernment in our parish, a year of thinking and sifting through a pandemic, a change in priest, the realities of hybrid church, and just what does it mean to welcome our neighbors on our hill. I have at times held my head in my hands and felt as if I was in this great muddle. Transfig the Hill, our 5-year vision, was created to help guide us forward, a vision to focus our mission on connection, character, and kids, a vision to make space to welcome everyone who passes by our hill, and also a vision to explore ways to raise up the next generation of members in our parish. And then there were the voices telling me it's too ambitious, too much, too soon, rein in the expectations. But here we are, a week before Christmas, in our own way, trying to give birth to a new chapter in our parish life. We have raised $16,500 of our $40,000 goal this year, and we have received a pledge of $10,000 for every year of the campaign over the next 5 years. To have the gift of being 1/4 of the way there is a true Christmas gift and a real blessing. Like for Joseph on Christmas Day, there is much to rejoice in. But I think we still need to hear the angel say, "Do not be afraid." Amen.